see. 1, 2, 3. I think so, right? Before you go to class, you're going to make sure I'm good. Hey, you're a good man. Thank you, Adam. Whoops. Is it me or was it a quick night last night? I said, is it me or was that a quick night last night? I have a sleep app and it showed that I slept deeply last night, but it was short.
One year, my mother set the clock forward. Father set the clock forward, and we arrived at church 2 hours early.
Oh my goodness.
And you go, did somebody call a church or what? And then they did the same thing when they called back one time. And we arrived at the Sunday school and go, I said, where is it?
Yeah.
It's over.
Right. I guess. Well, let's open our Bibles to 1 Timothy 3. I'm sure we're going to have people coming in through class with a time change. It just alters everything. I wonder if the animals know that we've gone back to regular time today. I mean, you kind of wonder about the birds. I mean, how do they... I don't know that they know anything about daylight saving time, do they, Steve? I mean, they're on God's time. So, wait. All right, 1 Timothy 3. I don't see Brady yet. I was going to answer a question from him, or finish a question from him from last Sunday. So as you're looking at 1 Timothy chapter 3, I'm just going to jump right in and I'm going to answer the question, or I'm going to forget it. But in verse 5 and 6, or actually verses 4 and 5 of 1 Timothy 3, talking about a bishop and the qualifications of a bishop, that he must manage his own family well and see that his children obey him with proper respect. If anyone does not know how to manage his own family, how can he take care of God's church? So it's self-evident, if you can't take care of your family and manage your own family, how could you be qualified to be overseeing the church? And as I remember, one of the questions, and it was about children. About a year and a half ago, I was asked to come down to Fayetteville to speak about the qualifications of elders with a church that was looking to appoint new elders in their church. And so I went down and gave a presentation, and then I found out later that one of the men that was being considered and was consenting and was desirous of serving as an elder. He was looked at as not qualified because he only had one child. And I thought in my mind, when we talk to each other and you come up to somebody and you ask, like, Dick, how many children do you have? Or Maurice, how many children do you have? If you have one, you answer that question, right? How many children do you have? One. Now, granted, if you were raised on my mother's side of the family with 10 children, and you've managed 10 children versus maybe 2 or 3, that, you've been on the front lines a lot longer. I understand that. But anyway, I don't think that these qualifications for, serving as an elder, as likewise a deacon, as we'll see here in a few moments, that it's about your ability to procreate, how many children you're able to father. So anyway, but the point that Paul is making is that if you can't take care of your own household, how could you take care of God's household? That's the driving point of that. I do want to finish up, though, as we were looking about the qualifications, the characteristics of a godly man, an elder, and we noticed that word elder, pastor, bishop, all of the same words, but in 1 Timothy 3, that Paul is using the word bishop, overseer, because he's illustrating it as God's household, a manager, if you will. And look again, let's look at verse 6 and 7, that he must not be a recent convert, or he may become conceited and fall under the same judgment as the devil. He must also have a good reputation with outsiders, so that he will not fall into disgrace and into the devil's trap. Not a recent convert. That means that an elder, which the word means a person who is of age and of maturity. So this isn't somebody who is just, as Paul says, a new convert, but he also gives a reason for that lest he become puffed up with pride, conceited. When Paul's giving these instructions, does he believe that there is a devil? There's a Satan? He does. In 2 verses, he uses that word. His worldview, obviously, is that somebody who is serving as a bishop, that we are, and this metaphor is used frequently in the New Testament, that we are in a spiritual warfare. And who is our enemy? We need to know who the enemy is, right? And that is Satan, the devil, diabolos. And again, in the next verse, what is the reason for all of this emphasis on character, good reputation? Is that the overseer has a good testimony with outsiders. So his reputation has to be above reproach, even from those who are on the outside. So he's known in the community because of the quality of the life he lives, where he lives. Now, it didn't used to be this way, but clearly a person who serves as an overseer is not in the same realm as what we see in the world of, American politics, for example, and what's going on the outside, that a person who serves as a overseer has to be of, as Paul begins, describing these qualifications, he must be blameless. He's free from accusation. He has a good reputation. He's known in the community, whether or not he's a person of wealth or he's poor. Some of the best elders I've worked with are, yes, indeed wealthy, and some of the best elders I've worked with, from a human point of view, were impoverished, and could see them work side by side. It's about the character within. It's not about what you've attained out in the civic world or economic world or academic world, those kind of things, but the qualities within. And so I want to just kind of pull all these threads together in a knot as we've looked at this last week and this week, and here going to look at about deacons. It's just so important to realize that the quality of life comes before function for one serving as an elder, and as well as we'll see about a deacon. So character is critical. that the ability to function is important. You don't want somebody serving as an overseer who cannot function, who cannot manage, if you will, what Paul has just said. That's what the word overseer means, a bishop. He oversees, he's a superintendent. So yes, it's important that he knows how to manage, but it can't be separated from character. It's not either or. And, somebody appointed as an elder, bishop, pastor, that doesn't make somebody an elder just because one is appointed. Appointment of elders is recognizing that those men are already leading. That's who you are publicly recognizing as your overseers, is because they have this ability to spiritually manage, nurture, care for, God's people. So when you're considering, which we did, not too long ago, how do I decide who should serve as a bishop? Well, it's one who's already doing that, one who's already shepherding. So you're asking yourself, is this person up front leading? Is he involved in the lives of people? Don't think that a man, becomes a leader just because he's appointed as a bishop. Appoint a man who's already qualified. I suspect for many of us, have traveled and been in churches in different places over a lifetime, that we've seen those mistakes made where somebody is appointed because they're well known in the community, but they don't have the character within. Or, maybe they're a person of great wealth, and it's assumed that they know how to spiritually nurture and pastor a church. And, it may be, yes, that one serves, in a high position, can likewise, yes, serve and nurture, manage, God's people, but not always. Because people will not follow somebody unless they have a Christ-like character. Does this person imitate Christ? Is this person living out, the Christ-like life? So, yes, selection is recognition of leadership. A person doesn't become a leader just because he becomes an elder. He's recognized as an elder because he is doing that. So, it goes back that we always need more elders, as likewise as we'll see, with deacons, but we need more qualified elders. There's an old saying, it's better to be scripturally unorganized than to be unscripturally organized, right? You want people who meet the qualifications, because that's what comes from God. Paul is an apostle giving these directives to Timothy in the church at Ephesus. These are the men that you are to appoint. Paul gives that delegated authority to Timothy to do that, as the same as what you'll see, the other pastoral letter, to Titus. I mean, Paul is even more direct with Titus in Titus 1, verse 5. He says, the reason I left you in Crete was so that you may appoint elders in every city as I directed to you. It's kind of like I gave you a verbal command, so get with it. That's what you're to do on the island of Crete. And then he goes through, the character that somebody should have that is going to be appointed. Okay, I'll stop a moment before we read into our next passage about those serving as deacons. A question, inquiry from either last week or something said this morning, or something maybe not clear. Okay, all right, so let's read, beginning verse 8 of 1 Timothy 3. Deacons likewise, respectable is what it literally says, but I'm reading an idiomatic translation, the New International Version. It says, deacons likewise are to be men worthy of respect, sincere, not indulging in much wine, and not pursuing dishonest gain. They must keep hold of the deep truths of the faith with a clear conscience. They must first be tested, and then, if there is nothing against them, let them serve as deacons. In the same way, their wives are to be women worthy of respect, not malicious talkers, but temperate and trustworthy in everything. A deacon must be the husband of but one wife and must manage his children and his household well. Those who have served well gain an excellent standing and great assurance in their faith in Christ Jesus. Although I hope to come to you soon, I'm writing you these instructions so that if I am delayed, you will know how people ought to conduct themselves in God's household, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and foundation of the truth. So the emphasis again here is on character, the qualifications, not function. But the word, as you go back to verse 8, deacon, is from a Greek word, diakonos. I'm sure with many sermons, Bible classes, that you've probably heard that word before, but it just means what? Servant. As Jesus said in Mark 10:45, the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. Diakonos, right? That a servant is what we know as a deacon. That word can be used and is used for minister or attendant or assistant or helper. The word deacon comes from a description, when you trace words, you keep going back, how far back can you go? It means a table waiter. I remember something, a wise woman whose name, who's passed on, Luella Pyle, said one time when I was visiting over at her house, I love in being in church watching men wait on me, It's a table waiter, right? A deacon. And as for example, look at 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 6. If you just go over a page. When Paul is giving directions to Timothy specifically about being a minister, he says in verse 6, if you point these things out, which is based on what precedes that, if you point these things out to the brothers, you will be a good diakonos, minister of Christ Jesus, brought up in the truths of the faith of the good teaching that you have followed. So, like Matthew would be described as a deacon. And that word servant, attendant, helper, administrator, it's the same word. So that word, as you just trace through and you read through, and you'll notice that, when you're reading throughout the New Testament, words in the Bible, just like we use language, they're used generally and specifically. So the word servant, in a general sense, we understand we're all servants. When you become a Christian, you become a servant. And as Matthew has reminded us many, many times, I'm, the public proclaimer here, but we're all ministers. Where is the church of Highland Hills? Well, the church is where you work. It's where you go to school. It's where your family meets. It's not just simply the address here. The church is everywhere. And so, yes, we're all ministers. But that word also is used specifically. Just like, the word, for an elder, generically, we mean somebody who is older. But then it's used specifically to describe somebody like a bishop or a pastor. Okay? So we use those kind of words. So in verse 8, I want to come back, is where he begins. that he says deacons likewise respectable. So deacons likewise, what is he just described as the qualities that you look for somebody to be a bishop, an overseer? We've just gone through those. And then he says deacons likewise, and the same word, must. Okay? So the qualifications for deacons are just as important as the qualifications for elders, because character counts. What's most important for somebody who is in a specific ministry of serving, administrating, under the oversight of elders? It's their character. The word deacon is not used in Acts 6, but the same word for serving that we get the word in the general way of serving. Those 7 men who are appointed, by the apostles to take care of the Grecian widows. We need people to serve. What was the most important before they could do that? Their character. That's what you read about beginning in Acts 6. So likewise here, it's about, their character. So the deacons likewise, just like we have talked about the qualifications of those who are bishops, here we go again, that these deacons that you're going to help appoint, Timothy, that just like the elders, as you go back in 1 Timothy 3 and verse 2, they are to be respectable. How can you follow somebody that you don't respect, who doesn't have dignity, who's not a person who's worthy of respect? How could you follow or imitate somebody? Even somebody who is just, a table waiter, right? Which is, what Jesus did, as you read in John 13, that he washed the disciples' feet, okay? So respectable, sincere, genuine, authentic, and not indulging in much wine. We talked about that in reference to the elders in the preceding verses. Not pursuing dishonest gain. All of these are about the qualities of life that a person must have. And likewise, these people serving as deacons, they must understand the deep truths. And we have a binocular view, as we'll get to the end of this chapter, about what is the central curriculum. It's about the Christ story. And so as he's talked about elders and deacons, he ends in this chapter, though the original text is not in chapters and verses, but he ends up with a reminder of what is the mystery of godliness. This is our belief. So deacons need to understand what is the Christian faith. And yes, they have to be tested. No one likes going through a test. I'm telling you, all those years in school and college and beyond, I never look forward to a test. I didn't raise my hand and say, I'd love to have a test. Because a lot of times that's all-nighters. I remember one week when I was in graduate school, I didn't have enough time to barely stop and eat. And I counted up in that one week that I had eaten 30 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I was pretty stuck. So, that we don't like tests. And then verse 11, in the same way, and the NIV translates this wives. If you see or look in your footnotes, and in my NIV translation, this goes, of course, I'm old school. I'm reading the NIV the old one, 1972, that came out. And my footnote says deaconesses. But here's the catch. That word's not in the original language. And when we're looking at verses, it does get a little complicated because the word for wives and women in the Greek language is the same word. So if you ask somebody, are you married? Yes, my woman is right beside me. It's the same word. So in the NIV example, they decided to footnote this to put, or the alternative for the word wives is deaconesses. So yes, the word for wives and women are the same words in the original language. And as you look through these descriptions for these women, I'll just use that word for the time being, they are to be worthy of respect, not malicious talkers. That word is the same word which is descriptive of the devil, diabolos, a slanderer, a strong word. They're not malicious. And Paul, through Timothy's letters, that, as you look in chapter 5, boy, that's a very deep concern for Paul. But temperate, okay, and trustworthy. And then, as we notice, then he comes back and he uses the word a deacon in verse 12 must be the husband of but one wife and must manage his children and his household well. So in the midst of this, you've got what we know as verse 11. So that means that the women in this verse, they have a special relationship to the men called deacons. Because he uses the word deacons, verse 8, are to be men worthy of respect. And then here in verse 12, the husband of one wife. We obviously are talking about somebody who's a male. Okay, a deacon must be the husband of but one wife. So these women have a special relationship with the men called deacons, either as their wives, or it could be that they're special female servants. Now, the NIV, as I mentioned, they footnote deaconesses, but that word's not in the original text. But maybe you're thinking this, there's a question that comes to mind when you're reading here. If these women are being especially instructed because they're the wives of the deacons, why does Paul fail to instruct the wives of elders in what you read as chapter 3, verses 1 through 7? Why does he, after he's described the qualifications of elders, if it's wives of these deacons that he's making reference to, why are they not addressing about the wives of elders? There you already got an answer. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right, right. Mm-hmm. Right. I would footnote it with when Paul gives the directive about the qualifications of elders to Titus, that he does go on into chapter 2 and addresses Titus about what to teach the older women, and those older women are to teach the younger women. But there isn't any reference in that instance either to these being the wives of either elders or deacons. But these are the qualifications that should be addressed to the women of the church, whether older and younger, which would include, obviously, the women who would be or married to the elders and or deacons, right? So in other words, it's for everyone. All the women are to be so instructed about the qualities that they should have in their life.
It goes the same when you're looking at elders.
Mm-hmm.
Could all have read it at first.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, that's our drawing.
Mm-hmm.
Those that are, well, if we're looking at volumes, every Christian should have it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's going to make it easy. So which ones, the ones that are capable of each one.
Right.
So every child of God should follow six steps. Different ones there is wives and children and daughters.
Mm-hmm.
So there's our drawing.
Mm-hmm.
Get out all these callings.
Right.
Anyone that is wives,
Right.
male and female.
Right.
I mean, this is what you're looking for. Find these brethren. Think of great.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, it is for everyone. So, whether it be the elders or deacons, I mean, you're just recognizing, like I say, that they have matured in these qualities in one's life, and likewise, women as well, and that would be understood, for wives of, yes, elders and or deacons. It's, this is, the responsibility of Timothy and Titus is to grow up the church, right? And that's what we're all to do, is to grow up. I will say, if, and or even if, how do you couch that? If the women are, female servants of a church, that's still, not a contradiction of what we read back in chapter 2 from, verses 11 through 15, where Paul doesn't permit a woman to have teaching authority over a man like a Timothy or Titus. Timothy and Titus are the evangelists who are given the representative authority by the apostle. You are to be appointing these people. With, just Terry's observation, and you may be thinking this, go over to, or with me, to Romans 16 a moment. We'll look at Phoebe a second in Romans 16, verse 1 and 2, where Paul is writing, obviously, to the church at Rome, and he says, I commend to you our sister Phoebe, a servant, the same word here, of the church in Cenchrea. I ask you to receive her in the Lord in a way worthy of the saints, and give her any help she may need from you, for she has been a great help to many people, including me. It's not specified what her particular task or role is to be to the church at Rome, but we do know that Paul has recommended her, and again, the word deaconess is not used in the New Testament, but in the original language, you have to have a noun has a masculine and a feminine. And this is the feminine version of this word servant. So in other words, if you're using a word and you're writing something, of course Paul is orally speaking this out and it's being written down. He doesn't use the word here that is deacon as a male. He's using the feminine form. So that tells us that this woman, Phoebe, has been appointed by the church to represent the congregation in Cenchrea in a special ministry that's appropriate for a woman to perform at the church in Rome. That she is a special servant. One of the things that you will notice when you come back to 1 Timothy 3 is that in verse 8 it says, deacons likewise respectable. And then in verse 11 it says, women likewise respectable. Literally. I mean, it points out that that Paul is concerned here that these women, albeit they're the wives of these deacons, or it could be that they are like a Phoebe that pertains particularly to women who are serving. There's one thing that you do notice is that he says, deacons likewise respectable, wives likewise respectable, or women likewise respectable. So whether you translate it as women or wives, how do you splice it? And I was thinking yesterday that 40 years ago, this year, I was asked to go to a church in Memphis, invited to come to a church that had over 650 members, and to be what was described as the involvement minister. They don't use that word very often anymore. They use the word executor minister. But my task was to run the church. The elders were delegating to me the responsibility to run the church. So there were about 30 deacons, and so I went through those 5 years, in the engagement of, seeing through deacons being appointed. But the church, via the elders, they wanted to engage the church in a ministry system where the church, as the body of Christ, was delegated in all these different ministries. And I found out in as we appointed these ministry leaders, that we had so many gifted women servants. And so I found out something that I see to this day, 40 years removed, and it's right here on our worship bulletin. Okay? And it says here, ministry leaders. And on here, it says fellowship, Janice Harder, ladies ministry, men's ministry, yes. But as you look through this guide here, children's ministry, Michelle Van Rieden, Walk for Water, Ellen Price. Who are these women? They are ministry leaders, okay? I think what we have practically done is that this comes from our restoring heritage, okay? And that restoring heritage is that we will speak where the Bible speaks and we'll be silent where the Bible is silent, right? In other words, we will use only Bible terms to describe Bible ways. And since the word deaconess is not used in the New Testament, but we know, just like the use of language, there's words that we use generally and there's words that we use specifically. We know that these women are tasked with specific ministries. But what is the word ministry? It's servant. It's the same word. It's attendant, helper. It describes men and women who are serving under the oversight of the pastor, elder, bishops, who have a special task, a special responsibility, who are like a Phoebe. There are men who are tasked with certain responsibilities, and so we use these terms ministry leaders for males and females for specific ministries. It may be, yes, that we, in a post-biblical time, we may, in our minds, think of these women as deaconesses. But that word is not used in the New Testament. But where we live is the word ministry leaders. And we recognize in this church that there are women who are female servants given a specific task. And as you see here, Paul comes back in verse 12, and he comes back to and says, a deacon must be the husband of but one wife, and must manage his children and his household well. Those who have served well gain an excellent standing and great assurance in their faith. So of those descriptions, there is no question. A deacon is a male servant, right? And it is of no question that even if we understand this passage, and there may be, differences, whether it be wives specifically or women, in verse 11, and this, I think, accents what Terry was pointing out, these women, wives or women, they have to be people of impeccable character. Let me stop a moment. A question. Heartburn, I have a question. Can you clarify that? Neil. Okay, okay.
The first one is 1 Timothy 3:1. What's the difference between aspiring to be elder, willing to be elder?
Well, if anyone sets his heart, that the word heart's not in the original. It's aspiring, okay? That one who's aspiring on being an elder or overseer, he desires. It's like a commendation. What if you were aspiring to be a overseer? That is recognized. This is a desirous work, but it is a work, a noble task. I don't know. I think it's like just an emphasis. Well, for one thing, I mean, your starting line is that they have to be or meet the qualifications that Paul is describing here. That they obviously have to be tested in that sense. But I think there's some avenue that has to be created to which, and we implement this by when somebody is put up for consideration to serve, this is 20 centuries removed, granted, as an elder and or in this instance a deacon, that his name is put forth, and if there is some question of his character, make it be known. And there should be a pathway to do to talk to the person directly, and it may just be a total misunderstanding, miscommunication, but yeah, I mean there has to be some way of authenticating that this person is authentic, genuine, and he does meet these qualities in his life that he's first tested. Okay? I'll come back to you a moment. I'm sorry. I've learned that all ministry leaders are not necessarily deacons. There's some deacons who are appointed, who have a special task. I guess what would be the reverse? Not all deacons are ministry leaders. Okay, there are ministries that somebody may have, by quality and character of life, been appointed as a deacon, but they don't have that ability to function as a leader of a particular ministry leader. I mean, just again, it's not either or; it has to be both and. So some people, just because they are appointed by a church to be deacons or a deacon, doesn't necessarily mean they can function in a particular area. They'd be mismatched. So you don't want a square and a round hole, for example. I mean, it just, I don't know if I'm answering it, fully or not. Right. Our time is away. I've seen hands, Barry, Terry, Dick. If you'll hold your questions, and we'll come back to it as we start next week. Maybe at least, we just generate thinking through some of these passages, and we'll try to get our dangling threads tied back in a knot given next Lord's Day. Okay? Here, thank you.
Being a child of a military person. Would you rather follow a sergeant with 8 hash marks or a lieutenant who got a gold bar because he graduated yesterday from Middle Tennessee State University? And one group one time said, the little person with the gold bar from MTSU will get you killed. The sergeant with 8 hashes will keep you alive.